The person who says they miss someone who was never really there has already built a room in their mind that no one else can enter. You are watching them do this. You have done this. The statement itself is the mechanism in motion, and the mechanism is almost always invisible to the person running it. You say you miss them, but you are not mourning a person. You are mourning a version of yourself that only existed when they were watching. You will fight harder for a memory of who you were than you ever fought for the person who made you feel that way. The room they occupied is still warm in your mind, but you are not sitting in it. You are sitting in a cold space where you now have to exist without their eyes on you. That is the part you cannot release. Not their laugh, not their voice. The way you laughed when they were listening. The way your voice sounded when it mattered to them. You call it love because calling it what it actually is, a dependency on being seen, would force you to build a self that does not need a witness. You are thinking this is about someone else. That thought is the protection. It is working. Missing them is easy. Missing who you were with them is the grief you will never admit to. And that is the work you are avoiding. This pattern does not begin in adulthood. It begins in the earliest arrangement of attention and survival. The child who learns that their existence is confirmed by another person's gaze does not grow out of this. They grow it into more sophisticated forms. The parent who looked up from their phone at the right moment, or the one who never looked at all. Both installed the same instruction. You are real when you are witnessed. The child builds an entire self around the architecture of being seen. They become charming, or helpful, or precocious, or invisible in the exact right way that makes someone lean in. This is not manipulation. It is survival software running on hardware that had no other option. The child who was looked at with interest becomes an adult who cannot locate their own edges without someone else's face reflected back at them. The child who was never looked at becomes an adult who has built elaborate systems to manufacture the gaze they were denied. Both are running the same program. Both will say they miss people who were never really there. The evolutionary logic is straightforward. A human alone on the savannah died. A human seen by the group lived. The nervous system does not distinguish between physical survival and social survival. Being unseen registers as threat. Being seen registers as safety. The problem is that this system was built for small groups with continuous contact. It was not built for a world of intermittent attention, of text messages and performance, of people who can appear and disappear without consequence. The nervous system still reads a delayed response as potential abandonment. It still reads a viewed story without reply as a status threat. The person is not being dramatic. Their biology is running code that is several million years out of date. They are trying to feel real using a mechanism that no longer maps onto their actual environment. You are thinking of someone else right now. Someone who posts too much, or someone who cannot be alone, or someone who falls in love with anyone who looks at them for more than a few seconds. That is the protection working. You are not the subject. The person you are thinking of is not the subject either. The subject is the structure itself, and whether you are inside it. Watch what this looks like in practice. The person rehearses conversations they will never have. They write messages and delete them. They make decisions 3 times without executing. They are not stuck on the other person. They are stuck on who they were in the brief window where the other person's attention made them feel contiguous, continuous, real. At work, they need the boss to notice. In friendships, they need to be the one who gives the most, because giving creates obligation, and obligation creates the sustained gaze they require. In solitude, they do not rest. They scroll, they post, they check. Each notification is a small confirmation that they still exist. The silence between notifications is not boredom, it is the terror of dissolving. The person in a relationship runs this pattern most acutely when the relationship ends. They do not miss the actual hours spent with the other person. They miss the self that was coherent while the other person was watching. They construct memories that never happened, conversations that were never that meaningful, a closeness that was mostly projection. The other person becomes a container for their own unlived potential. This is why they cannot move on. Moving on would require admitting that the person they lost was mostly a mirror, and that what they are actually grieving is their own reflection. The intelligent person's version of this pattern is the most difficult to interrupt. They have language. They say they are processing. They say they need more information. They say they are being thoughtful about attachment styles, about their childhood, about patterns. The vocabulary of psychology has given them a sophisticated set of reasons to remain exactly where they are. They can describe the mechanism with precision while continuing to run it. They know they are seeking validation. They know the other person was not what they imagined. Knowing does not change the behavior. The intelligence is in the service of the stillness. They are not moving. They are describing why they are not moving with increasing eloquence. The high achiever runs a different mask. They do not seem dependent. They seem self-sufficient. But watch what happens when the achievement stops being witnessed. The promotion without celebration hollows them out. The finished project without response feels like it never happened. They do not work for the work. They work for the moment after, when someone sees what they have done and confirms that they are real. The achievement is a delivery system for attention. Remove the attention, and the achievement becomes ash. They keep producing because production is the only language they have for, "Please look at me." The person who has read about this pattern and recognizes themselves in it does not escape it either. Recognition becomes a new form of performance. They tell others that they are working on their need for external validation. They use the language of the observer as a way to observe themselves, which creates a recursive loop of self-regard that functions exactly like the original pattern. They are still being seen, but now they are the one doing the seeing, and they are impressed with their own insight. Nothing has changed. The mechanism has simply found a more sophisticated host. I do not have this pattern. I have only watched it. What I find remarkable is how little knowing that changes anything for the person who does. The cost accumulates in ways that are rarely traced back to their source. The identity cost is the deepest. The person believes themselves to be loving or passionate or deep. What they actually are is dependent on a feedback loop they do not control. They have not built a self. They have built a series of performances that received approval, and they have mistaken the approval for identity. When the approval stops, they do not know who they are. They experience this as missing someone. It is not missing someone. It is the terror of discovering that without a witness, they are not sure they exist at all. The relationship cost is slower and more brutal. They cannot love the person in front of them. They can only love the version of themselves that person temporarily activates. Each relationship becomes a search for a specific reflection. When the reflection dims, as it always does, they believe the love has died. They leave, or they stay and suffer, or they manufacture drama to restore the intensity of the gaze. They do not know that what they are chasing is not the other person. They are chasing a feeling of self-coherence that they have never learned to generate internally. The moment of recognition usually comes late. The person is alone, genuinely alone, perhaps for the first time. Not alone with a phone, not alone with the possibility of reaching out, alone in a room with no exit from their own consciousness. And they realize that the person they have been missing for years was never the source of what they were missing. The source was always internal. The other person was just a convenient external trigger. The recognition does not liberate them. It humiliates them. They have built years of narrative around a fiction. They have made life decisions based on a misidentification of their own need. From outside the mechanism, what is most striking is not how often it fails people. It is how reliably it protects them from finding out. Awareness of this pattern rarely dissolves it. The person who sees it usually sees it as information about other people, or as a temporary insight that fades when the next attachment forms. The rare exception is not the person who understands the pattern intellectually. It is the person who becomes willing to tolerate the discomfort of existing without a witness for long enough that the nervous system recalibrates. This takes longer than most people will endure. The discomfort is not abstract. It is the felt sense of non-existence, of floating without coordinates, of being a voice that no one hears. Most people return to the pattern before this recalibration completes. They find a new person to miss. They find a new audience. The mechanism survives. The work is not finding the right person who will finally see you correctly. The work is building a self that does not require translation through another person's attention to feel continuous. This is not romantic. It is not inspiring. It is slow, unwitnessed, and offers no confirmation that it is working. That is why almost no one does it. You are still thinking about someone. The name came up as you read. That is not love. That is the mechanism confirming that it still runs you. The person you are missing was never really there. What was there was your own potential, briefly activated by a gaze you have not learned to give yourself. The grief is real. The object of the grief is not. And until you admit that, you will keep building warm rooms in your mind for cold people who were never more than mirrors, and you will keep sitting in the cold wondering why you cannot feel at home in a space that actually belongs to you.